She thought the woman sitting in the corner was just another customer, until one strange question made her freeze where she stood. No one in the diner knew that Rosalind was being tested, or that her quiet answer would make the elegant woman stare at her in surprise. By the end of the night, that one choice would start a secret that would change many lives, including her own. Rosalind's hands burned as she carried the heavy tray across the diner floor. The plates were hot, too hot, but she couldn't put them down yet. Table 6 was waiting. She pushed through the pain and set the plates down carefully, forcing her face into something that looked like a smile. The man at the table didn't even look at her. He just pulled out his phone and started eating. She walked back to the counter and pressed her palms flat against the cool surface for just a moment. Her whole body hurt. Her feet felt like they were walking on broken glass. Her back was a knot of pain that never loosened no matter how much she stretched. She was 41 years old and her body was giving up on her. The worst part was knowing it would never get better. This was her life now. This was all it would ever be. Her daughter Imogen was waiting at home. Imogen was 8 years old and she still believed her mother could fix anything. But Rosalind couldn't fix anything. She couldn't even afford to buy her daughter new shoes. The ones Imogen wore to school had tape on the bottom because the sole was coming off. Rosalind had watched her try to hide it from the other kids, and that memory felt like a knife in her chest every single day. The rent was due in 4 days. She was short. She always was. No matter how many shifts she worked, no matter how many hours she stood on her feet, it was never enough. Rosalind, her manager called from the kitchen window. His voice was sharp. Table 3 needs a refill. She grabbed the coffee pot and walked over to table 3. Her hand shook a little as she poured, and she prayed she wouldn't spill. If she spilled, Derek would write her up. If she got written up one more time, she'd lose this job. And if she lost this job, she didn't know what would happen to her and Imogen. The bell above the door rang. Rosalind looked up out of habit and saw an old woman walking in. The woman was different from everyone else. She wore a long dark coat that looked expensive, like something you'd see in a fancy store window. Her silver hair was pulled back perfectly, and she moved slowly, like she had all the time in the world. The woman sat down in Rosalind's section, right in the corner booth by the window. Rosalind grabbed a menu and walked over. She pulled her smile back out, the one she kept buried somewhere deep inside. "Good morning. Can I start you with some coffee?" The woman looked up at her. Her eyes were gray and sharp, and when she looked at Rosalind, it felt like she could see everything. Every bruise. Every worry. Every unpaid bill. "Yes, coffee please," the woman said. Her voice was calm and rich, like honey. "And I'll have the fruit bowl with yogurt." Rosalind wrote it down. "I'll get that in for you right away." She turned to walk away, but the woman spoke again. "What's your name?" Rosalind stopped. Customers almost never asked her name. "Rosalind," she said. "Beautiful," the woman said, and she smiled. "My name is Vivian." Rosalind nodded and walked away quickly. Something about the woman made her uncomfortable. Not in a bad way. Just in a way that made her feel too seen. She put the order in and poured the coffee. When she brought it back to the table, Vivian was looking out the window. The morning light made her face look softer, but there was still something powerful about her. Rosalind set the coffee down. "Your food will be out in just a few minutes." "You look tired," Vivian said. She didn't look at Rosalind when she said it. She kept staring out the window. Rosalind's chest tightened. "I'm okay," she said quietly. "No, you're not," Vivian said. This time she did look at her. "I can see it. You're carrying too much." Rosalind felt tears start to push at her eyes, but she blinked them back hard. She couldn't cry at work. She couldn't cry anywhere. "I have to get back," she said, and she walked away before Vivian could say anything else. The morning dragged on. Every table wanted something. Coffee, ketchup, extra napkins. Rosalind's body screamed at her to sit down, but she couldn't. She had to keep moving. When Vivian's food came up, Rosalind brought it over. The old woman thanked her softly, and Rosalind walked away. But when she came back later to clear the plate, there was something sitting on the table next to a $100 bill. An envelope. Rosalind stared at it. The $100 bill alone was more than she usually made in tips all day. "That's for you," Vivian said. "I can't take this," Rosalind said. Her voice came out shaky. "Yes, you can," Vivian said. She stood up slowly. "And there's more. Much more. If you're willing." Rosalind felt her heart start to pound. "What do you mean?" Vivian looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm very wealthy, Rosalind. A billionaire, actually. I made my money in technology and investments. And now I spend my time finding people who deserve a second chance." Rosalind couldn't breathe. This didn't make sense. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. "I want to give you 3 wishes," Vivian said. Her voice was steady and serious. "Anything you want. Money. A new home. A future for your daughter. But there's a test." "A test?" Rosalind whispered. "Your first wish cannot be for yourself or your daughter," Vivian said. "It has to be for someone else. A stranger. Someone you have no connection to." The words hit Rosalind like cold water. She felt her stomach drop. "Why?" "Because I need to know you haven't been destroyed by your suffering," Vivian said. "I've given money to desperate people before. People who only saw their own pain. They used the money badly. They hurt themselves and everyone around them. I won't make that mistake again." Rosalind's hands started to shake. "I don't understand." "You will," Vivian said. She reached into her coat and pulled out a card. "You have until tomorrow morning. If you want to accept, meet me at this address at 9. If you don't come, I'll know you're not ready." She put the card on the table next to the money and walked out of the diner. Rosalind stood there, staring at the card and the $100 bill. Her mind was spinning. Her whole body felt like it was buzzing. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark next to Imogen, who was curled up under an old blanket, breathing softly. Rosalind stared at the ceiling and thought about everything. The rent. The shoes. The pain in her body that never went away. The look on Imogen's face when she tried to hide her broken shoes from the other kids. And she thought about Vivian's test. Why would someone make her wish for a stranger first? It felt cruel. It felt impossible. She didn't know any strangers who needed help. And even if she did, why should she put them before her own daughter? But then she thought about something else. She thought about the woman who lived 2 floors down in her building. Her name was Callista. Rosalind had seen her in the hallway a few times. Callista was young, maybe 25, and she had a baby. A tiny baby who cried sometimes late at night. Rosalind had heard through the building manager that Callista was in trouble. Her boyfriend had left her. She had no family. She'd been evicted from her last place and was about to be evicted again. The baby had medical problems, something with his lungs, and the hospital bills were crushing her. Rosalind had never spoken to Callista. They weren't friends. They were just 2 people who lived in the same broken-down building. But Rosalind knew what it felt like to be that alone. The next morning, Rosalind took Imogen to school. She kissed her daughter's forehead and watched her run inside, her taped shoes flapping a little with each step. Then Rosalind got on the bus and rode across the city to the address on the card. It was a tall building made of glass. The kind of place that seemed like it belonged in a different world. Rosalind walked inside, and the woman at the front desk smiled at her like she was expected. A few minutes later, Vivian appeared. She looked the same as yesterday. Powerful. In control. "You came," Vivian said. "I came," Rosalind said. Vivian led her to an office on the top floor. The windows showed the whole city spread out below them. Rosalind felt small and out of place. Vivian sat down behind a big desk. "So, what is your first wish?" Rosalind's throat was dry. Her hands were shaking. She'd thought about this all night. She'd cried about it. She'd hated it. But she'd made her choice. "There's a woman in my building," Rosalind said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Her name is Callista. She has a baby. She's about to be evicted, and her baby is sick. She has no one." Rosalind swallowed hard. "I want you to pay off her debt. All of it. Her rent, her hospital bills, everything. And I want you to set up a fund so she can take care of her baby without drowning." The room went silent. Vivian stared at her. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. You don't even know this woman, Vivian said slowly. No, Rosalind said. But I know what it's like to be her. Vivian leaned back in her chair. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. She just looked at Rosalind like she was seeing her for the first time. Then Vivian smiled. You pass. Rosalind felt like the room was spinning. She gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. Vivian's smile was small but real, and there was something in the old woman's eyes that looked almost like pride. You pass, Vivian said again. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. Most people fail that test, Rosalind. Most people sit in that chair and they think about it for a few seconds, and then they make up some story about a neighbor or a coworker. They pick someone they barely know and they ask for something small. Just enough to pass the test so they can get to their real wishes. But you're different. Rosalind's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. How do you know I'm telling the truth? Vivian turned around and looked at her. Because I had someone visit your building last night. I know about Callista. I know she exists. I know her situation. And I know you've never spoken to her, not even once. She walked back to the desk and sat down. That's what makes your wish real. You chose someone who can't do anything for you in return. Someone who doesn't even know your name. Rosalind felt tears sliding down her face now, and she didn't try to stop them. I just kept thinking about her baby. About how scared she must be. And that, Vivian said softly, is exactly why you deserve what comes next. She opened a drawer in her desk and pulled out a folder. Callista's debts will be paid by the end of today. All of it. Her rent, her medical bills, everything. And I'm setting up a trust fund that will give her $2,000 a month for the next 5 years. That should be enough for her to get on her feet and take care of her son. Rosalind put her face in her hands and sobbed. She couldn't help it. All the exhaustion and fear and pain of the last few years came pouring out of her. She cried for herself, for Imogen, for Callista, for every person who was barely holding on. Vivian let her cry. She didn't say anything. She just waited. When Rosalind finally looked up, her face was wet and her eyes were red, but she felt lighter somehow. Like something heavy had been lifted off her chest. Now, Vivian said, you have 2 more wishes. And these can be for yourself. For your daughter. For whatever you need. Rosalind wiped her face with her sleeve. Her mind was racing. 2 wishes. 2 chances to change everything. She thought about Imogen. She thought about the apartment with the leaking ceiling and the broken heater. She thought about the diner and Derek and her body that hurt all the time. I need time to think, Rosalind said. Vivian nodded. That's wise. Most people rush. They wish for money and houses and cars, and then they realize later they should have wished for something else. Something bigger. She stood up and walked around the desk. I'm going to give you something right now, though. Something that's not part of the 3 wishes. She pulled out a checkbook and wrote something down. Then she tore off the check and handed it to Rosalind. Rosalind looked at it. It was for $50,000. She couldn't breathe. She stared at the numbers like they might disappear if she looked away. That's a gift, Vivian said. To give you space to think clearly. Pay your rent. Buy your daughter new shoes. Take a few weeks off work. And then, when your mind is clear, you come back and tell me your 2nd and 3rd wishes. Rosalind looked up at her. Why are you doing this? Vivian's expression changed. For the first time, she looked sad. Because no one did it for me, she said quietly. I built my fortune from nothing. I worked myself to death. I lost my health, my relationships, everything. By the time I had money, I had no one to share it with. No one to love. I was completely alone. She looked down at her hands. I don't want that for other people. I don't want people like you to break themselves just to survive. So I do this. I find people who are good, truly good, and I give them a chance. Rosalind felt fresh tears coming, but she blinked them back. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how to thank you. You already did, Vivian said. You wished for Callista. Rosalind left the building in a daze. She held the check in her hand like it might vanish into smoke. She got on the bus and rode home, and the whole time she kept looking at the check to make sure it was real. When she got to her apartment, she sat down on the old couch and just stared at the wall. $50,000. She could pay rent for a year. She could buy Imogen everything she needed. She could go to a doctor and get her back looked at. She could breathe. But she still had 2 more wishes. That night, after Imogen went to bed, Rosalind sat at the tiny kitchen table and made a list. She wrote down everything she could think of. A new apartment. A car. Money for Imogen's college. A business of her own. She wrote until her hand cramped, and then she looked at the list and felt overwhelmed. She thought about what Vivian had said. Most people rush. They wish for things that seem big but aren't big enough. Rosalind wanted to be smart about this. She wanted to wish for something that would change their lives forever, not just for a little while. The next 2 weeks passed like a dream. Rosalind deposited the check, and when the money showed up in her account, she actually laughed out loud. She paid 3 months of rent in advance. She took Imogen shopping and bought her new shoes, new clothes, a winter coat that actually fit. She watched her daughter's face light up, and it was the best thing she'd ever seen. She called the diner and told Derek she was taking some time off. He wasn't happy about it, but she didn't care. For the first time in years, she didn't care what he thought. She slept. She actually slept. Long, deep hours of sleep where her body finally got to rest. And she thought about her wishes. One morning, she woke up and knew what they should be. She got dressed, dropped Imogen at school, and went back to the glass building. Vivian was waiting for her in the same office. "You look different," Vivian said, smiling. "Rested." "I feel different," Rosalind said. She sat down across from the old woman. "I know what I want to wish for." "Tell me." Rosalind took a deep breath. "For my second wish, I want you to help me start a business. A real one. I want to open a care service for people who are struggling. Single parents, people working too many jobs, people who need help with their kids or their parents or just their lives. I want to hire people like me, people who need good jobs with good pay. And I want to run it. I want to build something that lasts." Vivian's eyes sparkled. "That's a good wish. What else?" "For my third wish," Rosalind said, and her voice shook a little, "I want you to set up a scholarship fund for kids like Imogen. Kids whose parents are working themselves to death just to survive. I want them to be able to go to college without drowning in debt. I want them to have a chance." The room was quiet. Vivian looked at her for a long time. Then she stood up and walked around the desk. She held out her hand. "You didn't wish for a mansion," Vivian said. "You didn't wish for $1 million in the bank. You wished for work and for other people's children." "I wished for a future," Rosalind said, shaking her hand. "A real one." Vivian smiled, and this time it was the biggest smile Rosalind had seen from her. "Then let's build it together." 6 months later, Rosalind stood in front of a small office space in a better part of town. The sign above the door said Imogen's Promise Care Services. Inside, 5 women were working, all of them single mothers who needed good jobs. They helped families with childcare, elder care, grocery shopping, meal prep, anything people needed to get through their days. Rosalind ran it. She made the schedules, hired the workers, met with the clients. Her back still hurt sometimes, but not like before. She had health insurance now. Real insurance. She'd seen a doctor and gotten treatment. Imogen was thriving. She had new shoes that fit, a warm coat, and a mother who wasn't too exhausted to read her bedtime stories. And the scholarship fund was real. It was called the Second Chance Scholarship, and it had already helped 12 kids pay for their first year of college. One afternoon, Vivian came to visit the office. She walked through slowly, watching the women work, talking to the clients. When she and Rosalind stood outside together, Vivian put her hand on Rosalind's shoulder. "You did it right," Vivian said. "You used your wishes to build something instead of just buying something. That's rare." Rosalind looked at the sign above the door. Imogen's Promise. Named after her daughter. Named after hope. "You gave me a chance," Rosalind said. "I just didn't want to waste it." "You didn't," Vivian said. "And now you're giving other people chances too. That's how it's supposed to work." They stood there together in the afternoon sun, two women who understood what it meant to be broken and to build yourself back up. Rosalind thought about the diner, about the pain in her feet, about the fear that used to live in her chest every single day. It was still there sometimes. The fear. But it was smaller now. And next to it was something else. Something she hadn't felt in years. Real, solid hope. And she was never letting it go.